Some nights are earthquakes. Some people walk in, and the ground splits open beneath everything you thought you knew about yourself. This is the story of how I met Levi, how I betrayed the one person who'd never betrayed me, and how I finally understood what it means to want something so violently that it feels like dying. My name is Julian Carter. 28. Classical cellist. I spend my days in a soundproof studio in Brooklyn teaching rich teenagers how to play bach. And my nights trying to remember why I ever thought music could fix what was broken inside me. 6 months ago, my fiancée Clara left me for a sound engineer in Berlin. She said I loved the cello more than I loved her. She wasn't wrong. I was still bleeding from that when my best friend Nora decided I needed reintroducing to the living. Nora Khalil, photographer. Chaos incarnate. The only person who can drag me out of the apartment without making me feel pathetic. She's been my ride or die since we were 19 and starving at Juilliard together. She's straight, I'm gay, and somehow that never mattered. We finish each other's sentences. We share clothes. She once told her mother I was her soulmate in a totally non-sexual, non-romantic, very intense platonic way that would probably freak most people out. Her mother still thinks we're secretly married. Friday nights became sacred after Clara left. Nora would show up with wine, Thai food, and a new person she swore I had to meet, usually some tortured artist who talked about the work like it was a religion. I hated it. But I let her do it because watching Nora charm strangers was better than sitting alone with the silence. That night she texted, bringing someone. Be nice. He's had a rough year too. I assumed another brooding painter. I put on the kettle for tea I wouldn't drink and left the door unlocked. When they walked in, the air changed. Nora first. As always, black leather jacket, red lipstick. Curls exploding out of a bun like she'd been electrocuted by joy. And behind her, Levi, 6'3", maybe 6'4", shoulders that filled the doorway. Skin the color of burnt honey, close-cropped hair, a faint scar slicing through his left eyebrow. He wore a charcoal sweater that looked soft enough to ruin lives and carried 2 paper bags that smelled like heaven. Jules? This is Levi, Nora said, kicking the door shut behind them. Levi, Julian. He's the reason I believe in God, because only a higher power could make someone this talented and this tragically single. Levi smiled, slow and crooked, and offered me one of the bags. Nora said you like Middle Eastern food. I brought manish from Sahadi's and some nyafa for later. Hope that's okay. His voice was low, warm, like smoke curling out of a fireplace you didn't know you were freezing beside. Managed to say thank you without dropping anything. Barely we ate on the floor because my table was covered in sheet music. Nora talked a mile a minute the way she does when she's nervous. I'm about to retreat into my shell. Levi listened more than he spoke, nodding, asking quiet questions that made Nora light up like he'd handed her a prize. Every time he laughed, a soft huff of air through his nose. Something in my chest cracked open. I learned pieces of him in fragments. He was a trauma surgeon. 31, grew up in Detroit. Mom, a nurse. Dad gone before he could walk. Scholarship to Johns Hopkins. Moved to New York 2 years ago after his divorce. She wanted kids, he said simply, tearing off a piece of manish. I wasn't ready. Maybe never will be. She decided not to wait. Nora reached over and squeezed his knee. Familiar. Easy. Too easy. I went very still because I knew that gesture. I knew the way her thumb rubbed small circles when she was comforting someone she loved in a way that went beyond friendship. I'd been on the receiving end of it 100 times. Later, when Nora went to the bathroom, I asked the question, burning a hole through me. How long have you two been together? Levi looked surprised. Then understanding softened his face. 3 months, he said quietly. Almost 4. The floor tilted. He saw it register. His eyes, dark brown, ringed with gold, held mine for a beat too long. I didn't know she hadn't told you, said. She tells me everything, I answered. And my voice sounded like someone else's. Nora came back humming, oblivious. She dropped between us on the rug and stole the last piece of nyafa right out of Levi's hand. he let her, smiling like a man who'd already surrendered. I smiled too. It felt like dying. They left around 1. Nora hugged me hard at the door. "You liked him," she whispered into my neck. "I knew you would." I held her tighter than I should have. After they were gone, I stood in the dark hallway for a long time, heart punching against my ribs. I told myself it was shock. Betrayal that she'd kept him secret. Nothing else. I lied convincingly for exactly 6 days. The next Friday, she brought him again. And the Friday after that, it became a pattern. Nora, Levi, me. Wine and music and stories that lasted until the city quieted outside my windows. Levi started texting me separately, first about a concert I'd mentioned. Then about everything. Books, recipes, the way the moonlight looked on the east. River at 3 a.m. when he got off a brutal shift. I saved every message. Read them in bed like contraband. I noticed things I had no right to notice. The way he rolled up his sleeves and the roadmap of veins on his forearms. How gentle his hands were when he passed me a glass, careful like he thought I might break. The small scar on his collarbone he got from shrapnel in Syria during a volunteer stint with Doctors Without Borders. The way he said my name, Julian, like he was tasting it. Nora never saw it. Or maybe she did and trusted us both too much. One night in November, it rained so hard the city felt underwater. Nora was stuck at a gallery opening in Chelsea. She texted, "Tell Levi to wait at yours. I'll be late. Don't let him take the subway in this mess." He showed up soaked, hair plastered to his forehead, sweater clinging to every line of his body. I gave him dry clothes, my clothes, and tried not to stare when he came out of the bathroom in my old concert black T-shirt that fit him like it was jealous. We drank tea on the couch. The radiator clanked. Thunder rolled overhead. He asked if he could play my cello. I almost said no. That instrument had been Clara's favorite thing about me, and after she left, I'd barely touched it. But Levi looked at me with those steady eyes, and I found myself lifting the case onto the stand. He tuned it carefully, respectfully, like he understood it was more than wood and strings. Then he played not a flashy piece, just the prelude from Bach's first suite, slow, aching, perfect. His bow control was astonishing for someone who claimed he hadn't played in years. When he finished, the last note hung in the air like a question. I couldn't breathe. He set the cello down and looked at me. Double quotes Julian, he said very softly. "Tell me to leave, and I will. I should. Have instead I crossed the room in 3 steps and kissed him. Like I was drowning and he was air, he kissed me back like he'd been waiting his whole life to do it. We didn't make it to the bedroom. We barely made it off the floor. Clothes peeled away between desperate hands and whispered apologies neither of us meant. When he slid inside me, it felt like the final movement of a piece I'd been trying to write for years and never found the ending to. Afterward, we lay tangled under the piano, rain hammering the windows. My heart beat loud enough to drown out everything else. He pressed his forehead to mine. "I love her," he said, voice ragged, "but I'm in love with you. And I don't know what the hell to do with that." I had no answer. Only the taste of betrayal on my tongue and the weight of his head on my chest. Nora found out 3 weeks later. I wish I could say it was noble that one of us confessed. It wasn't. She walked into my apartment without knocking the way she'd done since college and found Levi asleep on my couch, my arms around him, his face buried in my neck. The sound she made wasn't human. She looked at me like I'd murdered something sacred. Then she left. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She just walked out into the hallway and closed the door so quietly it was worse than any slam. Levi woke up when the latch clicked. He sat up slowly, face going pale as he realized. "I'll fix this," he said. "You can't," I told him. He left anyway. Went after her. They fought for hours on the street below my window. I sat on the fire escape in the cold and listened to the 2 people I loved most tear each other apart because of me. Eventually, the shouting stopped. A car door slammed. Tires screeched. Silence. Levi came back the next morning carrying 2 coffees and looking like he hadn't slept. "She's gone," he said. Left for Marrakesh, indefinitely. Said she needs to remember who she is without either of us. I took the coffee with shaking hands. I'm sorry, I said. It felt laughably inadequate. He stepped close. Cupped my face the way he'd done 100 times in secret. Don't be, he whispered. I chose you. I keep choosing you, even if it costs me everything else. I kissed him then, tasting grief and caffeine and something that might have been hope if we deserved it. We didn't live happily ever after. There's still too much damage. Nora won't answer my calls. Some nights Levi wakes up gasping from nightmares about the people he couldn't save. I hold him while he cries into my shoulder. Some mornings I play the cello and remember how Clara used to watch me like I was magic, and the guilt nearly swallows me whole. But most nights he falls asleep with his head on my chest. I trace the scar on his collarbone and think, some earthquakes don't destroy you. Some earthquakes just rearrange the landscape so you can finally see the sky. This is the story of the night I lost my best friend and found the love of my life in the same breath. This is the story of Levi, and how we're still learning how to live in the wreckage we made together. My name is Julian Vale, and I've spent the last 5 years perfecting the art of keeping people at arm's length. So when Noah Callahan leaned against my kitchen counter at 2 in the morning, sleeves rolled up, forearms still damp from helping me wash the mountain of dishes after my housewarming party, laughing at something stupid I'd said about my cat, I should have known I was already in trouble. Noah is my oldest friend, Leo's best friend from college. Leo, who moved to Seattle 3 years ago for work and left Noah behind like a parting gift to the city of Austin. Noah, with the slow Texas drawl and the hazel eyes that crinkle when he smiles and the quiet steadiness that makes everyone feel like they've known him forever. Noah, who is absolutely under no circumstances supposed to look at me the way he was looking at me right then, like I was the only person in the room, even though the room had emptied hours ago. You don't have to stay and help clean up, I said. Drying a wine glass that didn't need drying, I know, he answered, not moving. I want to. We'd met properly only tonight. Leo had warned me Noah was coming to the party. You'll like him, he'd said over FaceTime, grinning like he knew something I didn't. He's solid. The kind of guy who shows up. He wasn't wrong. The last guests had trickled out around 1. Noah stayed. He carried plates, wiped down counters, teased me about my overcomplicated coffee setup, and somehow, somewhere between the second bottle of wine and the quiet that settled when the music stopped, the air changed. I felt it first when he reached past me for a dish towel, his chest brushing my shoulder. I felt it again when he asked, voice low, you always this quiet when you're nervous? Or is that just for me? I laughed, too loud. I'm not nervous, liar, he said softly, and smiled like he'd won something. When the kitchen was finally clean, we stood on opposite sides of the island, a safe 3 feet of granite between us. He broke the silence first. You're different than Leo said you'd be. Good different or bad different? Just different, he rubbed the back of his neck. He said you were guarded, private. I didn't expect. He stopped. Didn't expect what? This, he said, gesturing vaguely at me, at the space between us. Whatever this is, I should have laughed it off. Should have said goodnight, thank you, drive safe. Instead I asked, and what is this exactly? He looked at me for a long time. Trouble, he said finally. The best kind. Then he crossed the kitchen in 3 steps, cupped my face like he'd done it 100 times before, and kissed me. It wasn't tentative. It wasn't polite. It was the kind of kiss that rewrites gravity. His mouth was warm and certain, tasting like the last sip of Cabernet and something darker. Something that felt like surrender. My hands found the front of his shirt without permission, fisting the soft cotton like I was afraid he'd vanish when we pulled apart. Both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against mine. Tell me to leave. Jules, I couldn't. Don't, I whispered instead. He kissed me again, slower this time, like he was memorizing me. His hands slid under my shirt, palms warm against my back. I felt myself come undone in pieces I didn't know were loose. We didn't make it to the bedroom that first night. We made it as far as the couch, clothed half in, half off. learning each other in the dark with the urgency of people who know exactly how bad an idea this is. After. He traced lazy circles on my shoulder and said, voice rough, Leo's gonna lose his mind, I know. I've never lied to him. Not once in 12 years. I know, I said again, smaller this time. He left at dawn. I watched from the doorway as he walked to his truck, hands in his pockets, shoulders tight like he was carrying something heavier than the night. I texted Leo before Noah even made it home. Noah left his jacket here. I'll drop it by later, Leo replied instantly. Hung? Sure, he did. He knew. Of course he knew. The next 3 weeks were a fever dream. Secret texts at 2. A.m. coffee runs we pretended were accidental. Nights he'd show up after his shift at the fire station, still smelling like smoke and cedar, kissing me against the door before the lock even clicked shut. He told me about growing up in a tiny town outside Lubbock, the only boy in dance class. How his dad never quite understood but never stopped showing up to recitals. He told me about the ex who wanted a life Noah couldn't give white picket fence, kids' Sunday church. How he'd tried for 2 years to be someone else before he broke and returned. I told him things I'd never told anyone. About the novel. I'd been writing for 6 years and was too scared to finish. About the panic attacks that still came sometimes. When the world got too loud. About the ex who told me I loved too carefully. Like it was a flaw one night, parked outside my house in his truck. Rain drumming on the roof, he took my hand and said, You're not careful with me, Julian. You're wide open. And it scares the hell out of me how much I like it. I wanted to stay in that truck forever, but the guilt was acid under my skin. Every time Leo called man, I miss you. Let's grab tacos this week. My stomach nodded. Every time Noah dodged plans with him, I saw the flicker of shame in his eyes. We couldn't keep doing this. So one Sunday, walking along Ladybird Lake, hands brushing but not holding because we were in public and Leo could appear any second, I stopped and said, We have to tell him. Noah went still. I know. Then why haven't we? He stared at the water. Because once we do, there's no going back. And if he hates me, his voice cracked. Leo's the only family I've got in this city, Jules. He pulled me out of the darkest year of my life. If I lose him over this, we'll lose him if we keep lying, I said quietly. He turned to me, eyes raw. I'm not good at halfway. You know that, right? If we do this, if we tell him, and he's okay, or even if he's not, this doesn't get to be casual. I'm already in too deep. I stepped closer. I've been drowning since the night you kissed me in my kitchen. Kissed me then, right there on the trail, not caring who saw. When he pulled back, he said, Then we tell him, together. That night, Leo came over unannounced, carrying a six-pack and a grin. Figured I'd stop by since both my favorite people have been too busy for me lately. Noah was already there, sitting on my couch like he belonged. Which, God help me, he did. Leo's smile faltered when he saw Noah's tense shoulders. My white-knuckled grip on the doorframe. What's going on? He asked, voice suddenly careful. Noah stood. We need to talk. Leo looked from him to me, and I watched the realization hit like a slow-motion car crash. No, he said quietly. Tell me you didn't. I'm sorry, Noah said. The words sounded torn out of him. Leo set the beer on the table, untouched. How long? 3 weeks, I answered. He laughed, sharp and humorless. 3 weeks. Jesus Christ. He looked at Noah. You couldn't even tell me to my face. You had to sneak around like I was scared, Noah cut in. I'm still scared. You're my brother, Leo. But he glanced at me, eyes fierce and terrified all at once. I love him. The room went silent except for the hum of the refrigerator. Leo stared at us for a long time. Then he picked up his keys. I need to think, he said, and walked out. Noah started after him. I caught his arm. Give him time, he turned to me, eyes glassy. I might have just lost my best friend. You might have, I said, throat tight. But you haven't lost me. He pulled me into him, burying his face in my neck. Stay, he whispered. Please just stay. So I stayed. Some nights change everything. Some loves are worth the wreckage. We didn't know yet if Leo would come around. We didn't know if the fallout would break us. But in that moment, with Noah's heartbeat against mine, and the future uncertain and terrifying in ours, I knew one thing for sure. I would choose him again and again, no matter the cost. The city was Seattle, not Portland. All steel gray water and perpetual mist rolling in off the sound. My name is Levi Park, 29. A freelance illustrator who hadn't left the apartment in Capitol Hill for anything except coffee and groceries since Noah walked out 8 months earlier. My older brother Julian, 33, married to his high school sweetheart Mara. Father to an exhausting 4-year-old named Luna had always been my anchor. When he called 2 weeks ago and said his best friend from college was crashing on their couch after a brutal divorce, I'd barely paid attention. The best friend was Simon Caldwell. Simon was 6'2", quiet, with storm cloud eyes and a voice like late-night radio. He had the kind of tired that looked permanent until he smiled, and then the whole room rearranged itself around the light in his face. Julian asked if I'd show him around the city, help him remember there's life outside courtrooms and depositions. I said sure, figuring one awkward coffee, maybe a ferry ride, and I'd be off the hook. That was 14 days ago. 14 days of mornings that started with Simon knocking on my door holding 2 paper cups from Analog. 14 nights that ended with us on opposite ends of my couch pretending to watch something on Netflix, while our knees touched and neither of us moved away. 14 days of discovering that Simon's laugh could unravel me, that he listened like every word I said was the first time he'd ever heard language, that when he said my name soft, deliberate, like he was turning it over on his tongue, something inside, my chest cracked open and refused to close again. We kissed for the first time on day 9. Standing in the drizzle outside Pike Place after the market had closed, he tasted like espresso and rain. I pulled back first, terrified, because Julian's voice was still in my head. He's going through hell, Levi. Be careful with him. I hadn't understood then that the person who needed the warning was Julian. By day 14, we weren't careful anymore. We were reckless. We were inevitable. Julian noticed, of course. He's my brother. He notices everything. At family dinner on Thursday, Mara's lasagna. Luna smearing sauce on her cheeks like war paint. Julian kept looking between Simon and me like he was trying to solve a puzzle with half the pieces missing. You two have been inseparable, he said, pouring more wine. His tone was light, but his eyes weren't. Simon answered before I could. Levi's been keeping me from turning into a complete hermit. He knows every secret bookstore in the city. That's my little brother, Julian said, smiling, but the smile didn't quite reach the corners. Always taking in strays. I laughed too loud. Simon's hand found my knee under the table and squeezed once. A silent promise. We'll tell him soon. We didn't tell him soon. We told ourselves Friday night. Then Saturday morning, then Sunday after Luna's nap. Every hour we delayed felt like borrowing time we couldn't pay back. Sunday bled into Monday. My phone buzzed while Simon was in the shower, steam curling out of the bathroom like it was trying to escape what we'd done. Unknown number. I answered anyway. Levi.
Oh?
Noah's voice, thick with vodka and regret. I saw your illustration in The Stranger last week. You're doing good. That's good. I closed my eyes. What do you want, Noah? I fucked up. I know I fucked up. I just can't we get coffee? One coffee. I need to look you in the eye and say, I'm sorry like a man. Instead of drunk texting at 2 a.m., you're drunk now. Pause. Yeah, but I'll be sober tomorrow. Please, Levi. Simon stepped out of the bathroom with a towel around his hips, hair dripping, watching me with that quiet intensity that made me feel seen down to the marrow. I hung up on Noah without answering. Who was that? Simon asked. My ex. I rubbed my face, being nostalgic. Simon crossed the room in 3 strides and pulled me against him, water from his hair soaking into my t-shirt. You okay? No. I was in love with my brother's best friend. Lying to the person I loved most in the world besides the man currently holding me, and my toxic ex had decided This was the week to stage a redemption tour. I'm fine. I lied. That night we finally decided we would tell. Julian together. Tuesday. No more excuses. Tuesday arrived wrapped in fog so thick the Space Needle disappeared. Simon had an early meeting with his lawyer. He kissed me goodbye at the door, whispering, "Tonight. After dinner, I love you." The words still felt illegal in daylight, like we were tempting fate by saying them out loud. I spent the day trying to work and failing. Every sketch looked like Simon's mouth, Simon's hands, Simon's eyes the moment he realized he was allowed to want this, want me again, after his marriage had gutted. Him, Julian texted at 4. Dinner at our place? 7. Mara's making that kimchi jjigae you like. Bring dessert. I stared at the message until the letters blurred. Bring dessert. Like any other Tuesday. Like everything wasn't about to fracture. Simon picked me up at 6:45. He looked impossibly beautiful in a charcoal sweater that made his eyes look almost silver. We didn't speak on the drive to Julian's house in West Seattle. He held my hand over the console the whole way. Mara greeted us at the door with Luna on her hip. "Uncles." Luna squealed, reaching for Simon because she'd decided somewhere in the last 2 weeks that he was her favorite. My heart performed in a complicated gymnastics routine. Joy and terror in alternating beats. Dinner was agony disguised as normalcy. Every time Simon passed me the banchan, his fingers brushed mine. Every time Julian laughed at something Mara said, I heard the countdown in it. Luna demanded Simon read her a bedtime story after we ate. He carried her upstairs like he'd been doing it for years. When he came back down, his expression was soft in a way that made me want to cry. Julian poured us all one last drink soju for him and Mara. Whiskey for me and Simon, and leaned back in his chair. So he said, swirling the liquid in his glass, "You two want to tell me what's actually going on?" The room went still. Mara's eyes widened slightly, but she didn't look surprised. Simon and I exchanged a glance that felt like stepping off a cliff together. "Jules," I started. "No." Julian held up a hand. His voice was gentle, but there was steel underneath. "Let him say it." He looked at Simon. "You've been my best friend since we were 19. Don't lie to me now." Simon set his glass down carefully. "I'm in love with your brother." The words hung in the air like incense, beautiful and impossible to wave away. Julian didn't move, didn't blink. The silence stretched so long, I could hear the refrigerator humming in the kitchen. Finally, "How long?" 2 weeks, I said. My voice cracked. "But it feels like 2 weeks?" Julian laughed once, sharp and humorless. "Jesus Christ. I thought maybe a month." 6 weeks. "Not." He dragged a hand through his hair. "He's my little brother, Simon. I know. You were married 6 months ago. I know. You're both." Julian looked at me. Something raw and frightened in his eyes I hadn't seen since we were kids and our mom got sick. "Levi, you don't do casual." "And Simon, he stopped, like the rest of the sentence was too dangerous to finish. "I'm what?" Simon asked quietly. "Broken," Julian said. The word landed like a stone in still water. "You're both broken in different ways. And I'm watching you try to glue yourselves together with each other," and his voice cracked. "I'm terrified it's going to shatter worse than before." Mara reached over and covered Julian's hand with hers. Luna's baby monitor crackled softly from upstairs, peaceful sleep sounds that felt obscene in the middle of this. "I love him," Simon said again, looking straight at Julian. "I didn't plan it. I didn't want it. But it's the realest thing I've felt in years. And I'm not willing to walk away from it just because the timing is shit or because it makes things complicated between us." Julian's eyes flicked to me. "Levi." I swallowed the lump in my throat. "I love him too. And I'm sorry we didn't tell you sooner. We were scared." "Of what I'd say?" "Of losing you," I whispered. Julian closed his eyes. When he opened them again, they were wet. "You think I'd choose anything over you? Either of you?" His voice broke completely. "You're my family." Simon stood up slowly and crossed to Julian's chair. For a second I thought Julian might shove him away, but then Simon crouched in front of him like he was the child. I'm not asking permission, Simon said quietly. I'm asking you to trust that I'll spend the rest of my life trying to deserve him. And you. Julian stared at him for a long moment. Then he reached out and pulled Simon into a fierce, clumsy hug that looked more like wrestling than affection. Simon's arms came around him instantly, holding tight. Mara let out a shaky breath that might have been a laugh or a sob. I couldn't tell. My own eyes were too full when they pulled apart. Julian wiped his face roughly with the heel of his hand and looked at me. You heard him, he said to Simon. Voice hoarse, and I will end you. Slowly. Simon's mouth curved. Small and sad and grateful. Understood. Julian turned to me. And you, if he hurts you, you come to me. No matter what. Promise me. I promise, I said. Then Julian stood up, crossed the room in 2 strides, and yanked me into his arms so hard my feet left the floor. I buried my face in his shoulder like I was 10 years old again, and the world was too big. I love you. He muttered into my hair. Both of you idiots, don't ever hide from me again. Later, after Mara had gone to check on Luna, and the 4 of us sat on the back deck wrapped in blankets against the cold. Simon's hand found mine under the wool. Julian watched us for a long moment, then reached over and covered both our hands with his. The fog had lifted while we weren't looking. Above us, the stars were sharp enough to cut. It wasn't fixed. There would be hard conversations, awkward family gatherings, probably years of Julian side-eyeing Simon every time he kissed me in front of him. But in that moment, under the cold, clear sky, we were whole. I leaned my head on Simon's shoulder and felt Julian's hand still resting on top of ours. And for the first time in 8 months, maybe longer, I believed that some things that break can be put back, together stronger. Some loves are worth the risk of everything else, even when they start as secrets. Later, after Marcus had gone to bed claiming exhaustion, but mostly to give us the living room, Ethan and I stayed on the couch with the credits rolling and the room lit only by the blue glow of the TV. He had his arm around me, my head on his chest, and for the first time in 2 weeks, I could breathe without feeling like I was stealing air. You okay? He whispered. I still can't believe he knew, I said. That he wanted this. Ethan laughed softly. Your brother is sneakier than both of us combined. I tilted my head to look up at him. Did you mean it? About not being opposed to. Wedding bells someday. He brushed a thumb across my cheek. Adrian, I meant every word I said in there. I'm not going anywhere. I kissed him then, slow and grateful, tasting the salt of relieved tears I hadn't realized were on my lips. That night we fell asleep, tangled together on Marcus's couch, shoes kicked off, blanket half on the floor, and it felt like the first honest moment we'd had since this started. But that's the original story. You asked for the same one, different skin. Here it is again. Longer, new names, new city, new stakes, Portland, late October. Rain tapping the windows like it had opinions. I'm Julian Vale, 28, graphic designer, chronically early to everything except admitting my feelings. My older sister is Camilo 32, firefighter, built like she could carry you out of a burning building and then roast you for needing to be carried in the first place. Her best friend since the academy is Rowan Hart 33, paramedic, quiet smile, shoulders that make people feel accidentally safe. And until 3 weeks ago completely off limits in my head, it started at Camila's birthday barbecue. She'd invited half the firehouse, half our family, and Rowan, who showed up in a black Henley and the kind of calm that made the backyard feel smaller. I was manning the grill because Camila insisted I was artistic with meat. Rowan wandered over, handed me a beer, and said, "Need a sous chef?" 2 hours later, we were arguing about whether Wes Anderson or Greta Gerwig understood color theory better, and his laugh did something unforgivable to my ribcage. By the end of the night, Camila was drunk enough to sling an arm around both of us and declare, "You two are my favorite people. Don't ever change." And then she passed out on the porch swing. Rowan walked me to my car because the porch light was out and the driveway was slick. At my door he hesitated, rein in his hair, and asked for my number in case Camila needs bailing out tomorrow. I gave it to him. He texted before I made it home. Still thinking about your argument on symmetrical framing. You were wrong, by the way. I smiled so hard I almost re-ended a Prius. 3 weeks of texts turned into coffee, turned into dinners, turned into the night he kissed me in the hallway outside my apartment, and I forgot how oxygen worked, and for 3 weeks we kept it from Camila, not because we thought she'd hate it. Camila loved Rowan like a brother and loved me, despite being my sister. We kept it quiet because the second it was real, it would belong to other people too, and we were selfish. We wanted it to belong only to us a little longer. But secrets get heavy. By the time Friday movie night rolled around at Camila's loft above the firehouse, I was nauseous with dread. Rowan was already there when I arrived, standing in the kitchen pretending to help with popcorn while Camila scrolled Netflix. Julian. She threw an arm around my neck the way she had since we were kids. I picked horror. You cowards ready? Rowan's eyes met mine over her shoulder. He looked as sick as I felt. We took our usual spots on her L-shaped couch, Camila on the long side, me in the corner, Rowan on my right. The movie was something with jump scares and bad decisions. Every time Rowan's knee brushed mine, my heart tried to evacuate my body. Every time Camila laughed, I wanted to crawl under the cushions. Halfway through, she hit pause. Okay, what the hell is going on with you two? I froze. Camila sat up, remote dangling. You've been weird for weeks. Both of you. Like wired. And you keep looking at each other when you think I'm not paying attention? Rowan opened his mouth, closed it. Camila's eyes narrowed, then widened. Oh my God, she said slowly. You're sleeping together, Camila started. You're together. She looked from me to Rowan and back. My brother and my best friend. Holy shit. Silence thick enough to choke on. How long? She asked, voice suddenly small. 3 weeks, Rowan said quietly. Since your birthday, 3 weeks. She laughed sharp. You've been lying to me for 3 weeks. We didn't lie, I said. We just didn't know how to tell you, so you decided not to. She stood, pacing the way she did when she was trying not to punch something. Do you know how this feels? Finding out like this? Like I'm some obstacle you had to sneak around? Rowan stood too. Camila, it wasn't about you being an obstacle. We were terrified of hurting you. Of making it weird for you at work? Or weird for me? She spun. Ro, you're my partner. Julian's my little brother. You think I haven't pictured this exact scenario in my head 1,000 times and hoped it might work? We both stared. She exhaled, dragging a hand through her short hair. Jesus, you two are idiots. Rowan found his voice. You hoped? Camila dropped back onto the couch. Rowan, I've known you were bi since the night you got drunk and cried about Keanu Reeves. Julian? I've known you were gay since you were 14 and tried to convince me your roommate in college was just really close. You're both lonely in exactly the same way. You're both too careful with people. I kept throwing you together because I thought maybe you'd notice each other and stop being lonely. I felt like the floor had vanished. You set us up, Rowan said. Wonder in his voice. I nudged. She corrected. Hard. Apparently not hard enough, since you still felt the need to lie to me for 3 weeks. We thought you'd feel betrayed, I whispered. I do feel betrayed, she said, and my stomach dropped. But not because you're together. Because you didn't trust me to be happy for you. Rowan sat beside her, careful. I'm sorry. She looked at him for a long moment, then at me. Are you happy? I nodded, throat tight. Disgustingly, Rowan added. Camila studied us. Is this serious? Or are you just... I love him, Rowan said. Simple and steady. I didn't mean to fall this fast, but I did. I love him so much, it's stupid. My eyes burned. Camila's voice softened. Jules. I love him too, I managed. I didn't know it could feel like this. She sighed, long and slow. You're both still idiots. But you're my idiots. She reached out, grabbed Rowan's wrist, then mine, and pulled us into the kind of rough group hug she used to give after my soccer games when we were kids. No more secrets. Promise me. Promise, we said together. She let go, wiped her eyes like she was annoyed they dared to water. Good. Now play the damn movie. I want to see this final girl light the ghost on fire. Rowan's arms settled around my shoulders, open, unafraid. I leaned into him. Camila threw a blanket over all three of us and stole half the popcorn. Later, after the credits, after she'd ordered Thai food and made us tell her every detail, she howled when we admitted our first kiss happened because... Rowan quoted Little Women at me. She looked at Rowan seriously. If you hurt him, I know where you sleep. And I have access to axes. Noted, he said, grinning. Then she turned to me. And you. Don't self-sabotage because you think you don't deserve him. You do. I nodded, tears threatening again. Camila stood, stretched. I'm going to bed. You two can have the couch. Or the guest room. Or the fire pole. I don't care. Just don't scar my firefighters in the morning. She paused at the hallway. For what it's worth, I'm really happy. You're perfect for each other. Took you long enough. The door clicked shut behind her. Rowan and I stayed on the couch, city lights flickering through the rain-streaked windows. He pulled me closer. So, he said softly, wedding bells someday? I laughed, wet and shaky. One crisis at a time. He kissed my temple. I'm not going anywhere. Julian Vale. Outside, the rain kept falling, but inside, everything finally felt dry and warm and ours. And for the first time in 3 weeks, I fell asleep without bracing for the moment it would all fall apart. The rain in Seattle never really stops. It just changes its mind about how hard it wants to fall. I was standing on the covered patio of the little Capitol Hill bar, watching the water bead on the string lights, when Julian said, "That went better than I thought it would." He wasn't wrong. We'd just told his sister, Mara, that the man she'd been teasing him about for weeks, the quiet nurse, kept showing up with coffee and dumb puns, was now the man he was in love with. Mara had cried, hugged us both until my ribs creaked, and then threatened to neuter me if I ever hurt her brother. Standard sibling stuff. Of course it went well, I said, bumping his shoulder with mine. Mara's known I was gone on you since the night you let me steal your fries. Julian laughed, soft and a little disbelieving, like he still couldn't quite accept that this was real. I took his hands. They were cold from the damp air. But his pulse was racing against my thumbs. I meant everything I said in there, I told him. About the future. About building something that lasts. He looked up at me, raindrops clinging to his lashes. So did I. I kissed him then, slow and deliberate, tasting rain and the last trace of the whiskey he'd nursed all night. When we pulled apart, he whispered, "Together?" Together, I promised. My phone buzzed against my thigh. I ignored it. It buzzed again. Julian raised an eyebrow. It's probably Mara sending embarrassing childhood photos, he said. But when I glanced at the screen, my stomach dropped. Noah, I saw you tonight. We need to talk, Noah, my ex. 2 years of fights and frostbite silences ended 6 months ago when he packed his vinyl collection and told me I was too soft for the life he wanted. I hadn't heard from him since Jolene read the message over my shoulder. His whole body went rigid. When did he see us? He asked quietly. I don't know. Maybe outside the bar. Maybe he was inside. The idea made my skin crawl. I didn't think he'd that stalking, Levi, Julian said. The anger in his voice wasn't loud, but it was solid. That's not okay. I know. I'll handle it. We'll handle it, he corrected. He laced our fingers together like he was anchoring me to the earth. Whatever this is, we do it together. I nodded, throat tight. The rain picked up, drumming hard on the metal awning above us. I felt the first real spike of fear I'd had in months. Noah showed up at my apartment the next morning. I'd spent the night at Julian's, so I wasn't there when he knocked. He waited in the hallway for 43 minutes, my neighbor. Mrs. Alvarez timed it, then left a note under my door. You can't just replace me. I'm not done. I found it when I got home to change for work. My hands shook so badly, I could barely text Julian. He was there in 12 minutes. still wearing his scrubs from the night shift. He took the note from me, read it once, and then folded it into a precise square and put it in his pocket, like evidence. You're not staying here alone? Tonight, he said. I'm not letting him run me. Out of my own apartment? Then, I'm staying with you. You didn't sleep much. Julian kept watch like a very attractive guard dog. And I pretended I wasn't jumping every time the radiator clanked. Edie Noah came back 2 days later. I was alone again. Julian had been forced to pick up an extra shift at the hospital. I opened the door without checking the peephole because I was expecting a grocery delivery. He looked like hell. Unshaven, eyes red, wearing the same hoodie he'd lived in during our last fighting month together. Levi. Noah, you can't be here. He pushed past me anyway. The familiar smell of his cologne hit me like a slap. You're really doing this? He asked. Some nurse you barely know? I know him well enough to know he doesn't scream at me until I cry. Get out. We were together for 2 years. 2 years, Levi. You don't just... You ended it, I said. My voice only shook a little. You told me I bored you. You told me I wasn't enough. You left. I was angry. I was stupid. I didn't mean you meant it then. I believe you now when you're cruel, Noah. I'm choosing to believe me now when I say we're done. He stepped closer. I stepped back and hit the kitchen counter. He's temporary, Noah said. He'll figure out you're clingy and sentimental, and he'll leave. And then what? Then I'll still won't want you back. I pulled my phone out. Leave, or I call 911 right now. For a second, I thought he'd fight me. Then his shoulders collapsed inward, and he looked suddenly small. You're making a mistake. The only mistake I made was letting you make me feel small for 2 years. Goodbye, Noah. He left. The door clicked shut behind him like a period at the end of a very long, toxic sentence. I called Julian from the floor, back pressed to the cabinets. Tears I didn't know I'd been holding back finally falling. I'm on my way, he said. Before I could even finish the story, when he got there, he didn't ask if I was okay. He just knelt, gathered me up, and let me shake against his chest until the storm passed. After that, I started drawing again, not client work. Not the safe, pretty commissions that paid rent. Real pieces. Messy charcoal sketches of Julian's hands, cupping coffee mugs, the slope of his neck when he was tired, the way he looked at me like I was something precious and breakable and strong all at once. One night, I showed him the sketchbook. He flipped through it slowly, expression unreadable. When he got to the last page, a drawing of us curled together on his couch, my head on his chest, he stopped. This is how you see me? He asked, voice rough. This is who you are to me. He kissed me so hard, had to brace myself against the counter. And then he carried me to bed and showed me, slowly and thoroughly, exactly how mutual that feeling was. The months that followed were golden. Julian's sister started calling me brother-in-law just to watch me blush. My little freelance illustration business exploded. Someone pinned one of my queer joy pieces on Pinterest, and suddenly I had a wait list. Julian and I ran the Lake Washington Loop every Saturday morning, arguing about podcasts and stopping to kiss at the halfway mark because we could. I started therapy. So did he. We compared notes like it was a book club for trauma. 5 months in, on a ferry ride to Bainbridge Island, just because we could watch the skyline recede, Julian asked me to move in with him. I know it's fast, he said, wind whipping his dark hair across his forehead. But my apartment is too quiet when you're not in it. My life is too quiet. I said yes before he finished the sentence. Moving day was chaos and laughter, and Mara yelling at us for lifting boxes wrong. By nightfall, my plants were on his hour windowsill. My weird vintage posters were on the walls, and our toothbrushes were tangled together in the bathroom cup like they'd always belonged that way. Mara toasted us with cheap champagne and declared herself responsible for everything good in our lives. To the next wedding, I get to plan, she said. Winking, Julian and I looked at each other. The same thought passed between us, warm and electric. She might not have long to wait, a year after we met. I had my first solo gallery show in Pioneer Square. 30 pieces. Our love story in color and line and negative space. Coming out at 23, the terror of first dates. The night Julian kissed me in my kitchen and refused to let me hide anymore. The drawing of us on the ferry, wind in our hair. The whole city behind us like a promise. Julian wore a deep green suit that made his eyes look unreal. Mara cried through the entire opening. Even my estranged mom sent flowers. The last piece was covered. Julian noticed immediately. "What's under there, babe?" "You'll see," I said, nerves sparking. When the crowd thinned to just us and the gallery owner locking up, I pulled the cloth away. It was us the night he asked me to move in. But in the foreground, I'd painted him on one knee, holding out a ring that wasn't there yet. At the bottom, in small, careful letters, he asked me to build a life. I said yes before he finished. Julian stared. His eyes filled. "I had a whole plan," he whispered. "Dinner at Canlis, violinist, speech." Then he dropped to one knee right there on the gallery floor. Between paintings that told the story of how we began, the ring was white gold, brushed matte, with a thin line of opal inlaid like sunrise, inside metal. "Levi Zhao," he said. Voice cracking, "You are the bravest, kindest, most ridiculous person I've ever loved. I want mornings with you, and fights with you, and ferry rides, and stupid running arguments, and every single ordinary day. Marry me?" I was crying too hard to speak, so I just nodded like an idiot until he laughed and slid the ring on. Later, when the lights were off and the city glittered outside the windows of our apartment, he pressed his face into my neck. "Thank you," he whispered. "For what?" "For letting me love you out loud. For choosing me back every single day." I kissed the top of his head. "Always," I said. "I'll always choose you." Outside, Seattle kept raining, soft and steady, washing the world clean for whatever came next. And inside, we started writing the rest of our story, one drawing, one kiss, one yes at a time.